Right now, you would probably describe yourself in a few words. Maybe you'd say you're shy, or ambitious, or anxious, or the funny one in the group. You believe these words describe something real, something that lives inside you, something that is, in a very deep sense, you. But what if it isn't? What if the thing you call your personality is not a fixed object sitting somewhere inside your skull, but something closer to a weather pattern, shaped by forces you never chose, shifting more than you realize, and far less solid than it feels? This is the strange, uncomfortable, and ultimately freeing science of where your personality actually comes from. Start with a simple question. Are you the same person you were at age 7? Most people say no instantly. Of course not. You've changed. But ask a follow-up question. Are you the same person you'll be at 70? And something interesting happens. People hesitate. There's a strange certainty that creeps in, a feeling that whoever you are right now is, finally, the real you. The previous versions were drafts. This one is final. Psychologists have a name for this. Daniel Gilbert, a Harvard psychologist, ran a series of studies in 2013 and called the result the end of history illusion. People across every age group, 18, 30, 50, 68, consistently believed they had changed a great deal in the past, but predicted they would change very little in the future. Teenagers thought they'd basically arrived. 40-year-olds thought they'd basically arrived. Even people in their 60s believed the next decade would leave them mostly the same. They were all wrong. Gilbert compared people's actual personality changes over a decade to their predicted changes, and the gap was enormous. Every single age group underestimated how much they would change. You are, right now, in the middle of becoming someone you cannot yet imagine. And you don't feel it happening because the illusion is built directly into how memory works. So if your personality isn't fixed, what is it actually made of? For most of the 20th century, psychology searched for a clean answer: traits. Stable, measurable characteristics like extroversion or conscientiousness that supposedly predicted behavior across every situation. The Big Five model, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, became the dominant framework. You take a test, you get 5 scores, and those scores are supposed to be you. But in 1968, a psychologist named Walter Mischel published a book that detonated this entire idea. Mischel reviewed decades of personality research and found something the field didn't want to hear. The correlation between a person's trait score and their actual behavior in real situations was shockingly weak. Someone who scored high on conscientiousness might be meticulously organized at work and completely chaotic at home. Someone who scored as introverted might be quiet at a party and ferociously talkative with close friends. Mischel called this the personality paradox. We believe traits predict behavior. The data says otherwise. What predicts behavior far better than any trait score is something almost nobody thinks about: the situation. This became known as situationism, and it reshaped the field. Mischel's later work, particularly his collaboration with psychologist Yuichi Shoda, proposed something called the cognitive affective personality system. Instead of asking, what is this person like, the question became, what does this person do in this specific situation, given this specific trigger? Think about what that means for you. You are not one fixed thing wearing different masks. You are, more accurately, a collection of if-then patterns. If you're in a room with your oldest friends, then you become talkative and loose. If you're in a room with your boss, then you become guarded and careful. Both of these are you. Neither is a mask hiding the real you underneath. There may not be a real you underneath, in the way you've always imagined it. This is unsettling at first. It sounds like it's saying you don't exist or that you're fake or inconsistent in some shameful way. But that's not what the research shows. It shows something stranger and more interesting. Consider an experiment that's become foundational in social psychology: the Princeton Theological Seminary study, conducted by John Darley and Daniel Batson in 1973. They took seminary students, Opal training to become ministers, people who, if anyone should have a stable, generous personality, it should be them, and told them to walk across campus to deliver a talk. Some were told they had plenty of time. Others were told they were already late. Along the path, the researchers placed an actor slumped in a doorway, groaning, clearly in distress. The question was simple: who stops to help? The content of the talk some students were about to give was, almost unbelievably, the parable of the Good Samaritan, a story specifically about stopping to help a stranger in need. It didn't matter. The single biggest predictor of whether someone stopped to help wasn't their religiosity, their stated values, or how compassionate they considered themselves. It was whether they had been told they were late. Students in a hurry stepped over a person in visible distress at dramatically higher rates than students who weren't rushed, even when that exact person was minutes away from delivering a sermon about helping strangers. This is not a story about seminary students being bad people. It's a story about how thin the line is between trait and circumstance. The situation overpowered the values. Not because the values were fake, but because behavior is far more contextual than your sense of self wants to admit. So where does this leave the thing you call your personality? Here's where the picture gets even bigger. Personality isn't only shaped moment to moment by situations. It's shaped across your entire life by the roles you've been placed in, often before you had any say. Psychologist Brian Little developed a framework called free traits theory, which proposes that you have a kind of biogenic personality, tendencies that may be partly genetic, but you also develop sociogenic personality, traits you adopt because your environment, your family, your culture demanded them. A child raised in a household that punished emotional expression doesn't simply have a reserved personality. They learned, through repetition and consequence, that reservation was safe. That learned pattern becomes so deeply practiced it eventually feels indistinguishable from an innate trait. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Much of what you call your personality may not be something you are. It may be something you built brick by brick in response to a specific childhood, a specific culture, a specific set of people who rewarded certain behaviors and punished others. The shy person at the party may not have been born shy. They may have learned, at age 6, that speaking up got them laughed at, and built an entire adult identity around the lesson. Twin studies complicate this further, in a way that cuts against both extremes. Research from behavioral geneticists like Thomas Bouchard, who studied identical twins raised apart, found that personality traits show roughly 40 to 50% heritability. That's substantial. Genes clearly matter. But it also means roughly half of who you are has nothing to do with your genes at all. And even the genetic half doesn't express itself in a vacuum. It interacts constantly with environment, timing, and chance. So you are not a fixed essence. You are not a blank slate either. You are something closer to a live negotiation between genetic tendencies you didn't choose, situations you didn't design, and roles you were handed before you understood you were being handed anything. Here is where this stops being unsettling and starts being something else entirely. If your personality were fixed, permanent, carved into you at birth, then the parts of yourself you don't like would be sentences with no appeal. But the research says otherwise. Brian Little's free traits theory includes something called the free trait, the deliberate, temporary adoption of behavior outside your so-called natural disposition, in service of something you care about. The introvert who becomes animated and outgoing while teaching, because they love the material. The anxious person who becomes calm and decisive in a crisis, because someone needs them to be. You are capable of behavior that contradicts your own self-description, regularly the moment the situation calls for it. This isn't you being fake. This is you being exactly what the research says you are. A flexible system responding to circumstance, not a fixed object trapped inside a label. Daniel Gilbert's end of history illusion isn't just a cute finding about how bad you are at predicting your future self. It's evidence that you are still under construction. The person reading this sentence is not the final draft. There is no final draft. There was never going to be one. So the next time you describe yourself with a single word, shy, anxious, lazy, difficult, ask what situation taught you that word. Ask what room you were standing in when you first decided it was true. And ask whether you're still standing in that room, or whether you've just kept describing yourself as if you never left. You walked into this video believing you know exactly who you are. You're walking out with a stranger, slightly more your own, slightly less fixed, still being written.